Well, hello, everyone. My name is John Paul. I'm the Senior Manager of Public Affairs and Traffic Safety for AAA. And with everything we read in the paper today about electric vehicles and where they're going to go and where they are, we still like to get an idea of what the future is going to be like. And joining us today is Guy Perlmuter. He is the CEO of a venture capital company and a author of a new book. And what must be great about venture capital is you find out what people are up to and what they want to do. And Guy, good day and welcome to this AAA car conversation.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me, John.
And here in the United States, there's a lot of talk about some states want to be fully electric by the year 2035. General Motors wanted to be fully electric by 2035, although it seems like they've decided maybe if not everybody wants to be fully electric, that might be a bit of a change. So they may be pushing back just a little bit. Certainly, we're seeing an awful lot of hybrid vehicles. I just drove or just saw at least a new Ford Maverick, which is the new compact pickup truck that's a hybrid, which is pretty interesting looking. And I talked to somebody from a company called Indigo, which is developing a small electric vehicle really aimed at the gig economy, where it's going to be a $20,000 to $25,000 vehicle, really aimed at trying to keep people who deliver for Uber Eats and Lyft and other companies to be able to make a practical switch over to electric vehicles. With your company, where do you see the future of electric vehicles going?
So yeah, that's a great question, and I guess there are trends or inevitabilities that we all have to deal with when we look into the future of multiple areas of the economy. And it certainly feels that electric is one of those inevitabilities when it comes to transportation, right? We can certainly focus on light duty vehicles, because when we talk about medium duty and heavy duty, the conversation may change a little bit. But it certainly feels like light duty vehicles will have an electric future. If it's going to be hybrid, if it's going to be 100% electric, I feel there's a transition on its way. I feel that we're going to see things gradually moving from hybrid into fully electric over the next few decades. And as you said, it's not only specific states in the US that are I think preparing themselves for a fully electric fleet in the future. There are many countries all around the world that have established very strict legislation indicating that they will not be into internal combustion engines in the 2040s or even sooner.
And when you have to look at this, and when you have to look at whether it's worldwide or locally here in the US, the idea of is there enough electricity available to power all these electric vehicles always seems to be a question that comes up. As you do this deep dive into technology, what do you see there?
Well, that's again, this is a great way to kick off the conversation, because when you look at the sheer number of electrical vehicles out there, we're looking at about 1% of the global fleet. We're talking about, a minuscule percentage, which certainly feels like it's going to creep up over time, but it's not going to be tomorrow or next year or in a couple of years, right? This is going to take a lot of time. And one of the things that I guess a lot of people have been questioning is, okay, the cars may be electric, they may have very low emissions because, of course, the output of those processes are going to be very beneficial to the environment. However, they have to be charged, and that electricity in it by itself has to come from somewhere. And if you look at the global energy matrix today, we still depend about 85% in non-renewable fuels. We're talking about sources like oil and coal and even natural gas that are non-renewable. So not only this is something that will change slowly, it is changing, but people expect this number to drop to 75% in another 20 years. So from 85% to 75% overall renewable, non-renewable energy sources in another 20 years. But also there is something that I know you've talked about in your show about the practicality of electrical vehicles, in the sense that people have to take some time to refill it, right? The batteries right now, there have been a lot of innovation there, but in general, it takes some time for those batteries to be fully charged. It's not like your average diesel car that you just stop at a fuel station and in 5-10 minutes you're all but done. So I think all those sources, all those challenges are exactly the challenges that are going to be addressed over time, so that people understand that there's a new energy drain, if you will, that we'll have to deal with, which is how we're going to power hundreds of millions of cars that are going to rely on batteries as opposed to internal combustion engines.
Yeah, it really is a bit of a challenge. And I think what we're seeing, whether it's Lucid or Tesla or any of the other car companies that are focusing primarily on EVs, they are going to gain popularity. There's no case about it. Whenever I start to see a Tesla in someone's neighborhood, it doesn't take but a few months later before I see another one. And it seems to gain that popularity once people seem to adapt to them. But you're right, looking at how we're going to refuel these vehicles and having the energy necessary to do it. And I guess when it comes to electric cars, if you looked at the turn of the last century, whether it's a Baker Electric from the early 1900s to an electric car that may have been available in the 70s, there really wasn't a lot of change. Those cars had some top speed of between 40 and 60 miles an hour, and they go 50 or 60 miles between charges. But today, some of the premium electric vehicles are going hundreds of miles, 200, 300, even I think the top of the line Lucid car says close to 500 miles between charges. So we are seeing the electric car, in a lot of cases, having that ability to replace that regular car. But you're absolutely right. When it comes to recharging, do I really want to, even on quick recharging, do I really want to hang around and wait 45 minutes for my electric car to recharge? So are you seeing, as the CEO of Grid Capital, are you seeing companies coming to you with some possible solutions for this recharging issue?
Oh yes, that's I think a focus point, because as we were saying before, the inevitabilities of the future do include a world that will require more electricity. All of us, if you think about your life 10, 20, 50 years ago, and how much electricity you needed for your daily needs, between then and now, the change has been spectacular, right? All of us, we're electricity consumers, avid electricity consumers, with our phones and tablets and laptops and computers and cars. So I feel that that's definitely a point of attention that many entrepreneurs are looking into. So there is massive amounts of research going into batteries and the materials that go into them, to make sure that they have not only broader range, so that people need to charge less frequently, but when they need to charge, to make that process seamless and as fast as possible. And to your point, you're right. I mean, back in the early 20th century, we had the 100 Mi Fritzl, which was one of the most famous electrical vehicles, and they had offices in Fifth Avenue, and the U.S. fleet back in the late 19th century was about a third, composed by a third of electric vehicles. And there was even a famous partnership that was ironed out between Henry Ford and Thomas Edison back in the early 20th century, because everybody felt that electric cars were going to become a thing then. And this is, again, part of the theme of Present Future, the book I wrote. It's all about how we're living a future that has been hinted over the past decades or centuries, and it's going to continue to be so. So to your point, I feel that one of the key innovations that we may expect in the electric vehicle space is not only faster charging times, but also I think there's a lot of people dedicating themselves into the batteries themselves, because as you said, there have been improvements, but they have been steady and surely improvements. You have not seen those breakaways improvement that change by orders of magnitude the range or the autonomy of a specific car.
Yeah, I know back a while ago, I talked to a company that was developing a battery made out of a graphite-based material, graphene, which looks like it was going to hold some real promise because it's also safer. It doesn't tend to combust if you get into a car crash, and it's supposed to have more energy density than, let's say, lithium ion or whatever we're using today for batteries. So,
absolutely,
yeah. So the idea of we're seeing some of these progressions, but the idea we've come so far in, say, 10 years. In the last 10 years, we went from kind of electric cars that didn't change a whole lot to some pretty fabulous vehicles these days.
No, you're absolutely right. And this is again, this is a quote that I often repeat, and it's actually, one of the first quotes that I mentioned in the book by an American psychologist called John Licklider. He wrote a phenomenal book in the 1960s called Libraries of the Future. And he used to say that we humans, we tend to overestimate everything we can achieve in 12 months, but we underestimate everything we can achieve in 10 years. So to your point, you're absolutely right. I think there was a lot of hype in many times in history when we thought, okay, this is going to be a game changer and we're going to see this change in the next few months. And then there was a lot of disappointment because the change didn't come to fruition. But lo and behold, 10 years later, all that promise was being delivered and more. So I think you're absolutely right. I think this is the time frame that we have to kind of keep our eyes on, because this is the basic cycle of innovation, especially when it comes to a broad topic like electric cars and lithium ion batteries and recycling those batteries. Right now, it's more expensive to recycle a lithium ion battery than to kind of just build a new one, right? So these are processes that are also going to be looked into, and I feel that the next 5 to 10 years we're going to witness massive change in this whole dynamic of the EV cars.
Yeah, and I've said before, and I hate putting a date on things, because when you put a date on something, you can be easily labeled as a false prophet of sorts. So, but I've said that probably in 20 years, at least here in the United States, that maybe a pure internal combustion engine car might be as rare as one with a clutch pedal, which we don't see very many today at all. So, so maybe in that 20 years, most cars will be some form of electric vehicles. Let's talk about price of electric vehicles. So the price to get into an electric vehicle right now is the kind of price to entry is around 40,000. With I was just at a convenience store a week or so ago, and somebody pulled up with a Porsche Taycan, very expensive car, very fast car, beautiful car, but not a vehicle for everyday consumers. What are we seeing for electric vehicle development as it comes to price?
Yes, this is again, we've seen that, we've witnessed that in multiple occasions. The flat screen TVs and the Blu-ray players back when people needed physical media, they all start at a hefty price point where you have early adopters, people that can spare, thousands of dollars into owning something and being at the very forefront of a specific trend. But as most of those innovations, it's a matter of scale, right? And if you look at Tesla, to your point, if you look at the early days of Tesla, and now that they have some critical mass, they have a market, they have a reputation to uphold, there are price points that you can look at into their offering, that you can at least start a comparison with cars that are not electric, right? And this is only going to increase. And one thing that I would not be surprised if we witnessed, right, especially in Europe, where there's a huge push for electrical vehicles, especially in large urban centers where the greenhouse gases have reached unbearable limits. I would not be surprised if we saw massive subsidies from governments to consumers to make that gap as close as possible, to make sure that the market gets there quickly. But even without those subsidies, assuming they will not occur, and I believe they will at some point, even if they don't occur, I think that the sheer amount of money that is pouring into research for more efficient batteries, for better refueling stations, for actually changing the mindset of how consumers look into their relationship with their cars, I think that this will drive the price of electrical vehicles rather quickly into a more comfortable zone where we're going to see a larger swath of the population being able to acquire one for their personal use.
Yeah, and with the average new car price hovering right around $40,000, that electric car that starts at $40,000, whether it's a Chevrolet Bolt or a Tesla Model 3 or whatever the case, Ford Mustang Mach-E, they're all in that $40,000 to $50,000 price range. So we're starting to see a little bit more of that. But the typical car that gets purchased every year tends to be a used car. Do you think there's going to be at some point really a used car, a big market for used electric vehicles as we start to see them age out a bit?
I think so, yes, because I feel that as much as we discuss the fact that cars are electrical, and this is something that we should note, to your point, in 20 years, and I kind of have to agree with your prediction, right? I also am not a big fan of putting dates there, yep. But it feels very conservative. It feels like you are onto something here. So in 20 years, when we see an ad on a paper or whatever means we're going to be using to communicate, the buying and selling of goods, I think that people will not even mention that it's electrical car. The car is electrical. I think it's going to be the opposite. I think people are going to say, oh, by the way, this is a relic. This is an internal combustion engine car for collectors. So I feel that, yes, we're going to have a market where pretty much everything we see today in our automobile market is going to overflow into the electrical vehicle market. I feel that the price point is going to be all over the place. I think we're going to see some popular models where you're going to be able to afford, electrical cars for, under $25,000, $28,000. I think this is going to happen, maybe not in a couple of years, but definitely in the 5 to 10 year range. And of course, we're going to see the 75 to 150,000 electrical vehicles where it's going to be not about the battery or the engine, but about the thrills and feels that they're going to put around it. So everything we see today in the regular, if you will, automobile market, I think is going to definitely be mimicked by the electrical vehicle car market in a few years.
So this decade could really be the golden era, the new golden era of the automobile, where the consumer can go out and buy a gasoline car, a high performance gasoline car, a high performance electric car, a high performance hybrid car, a car that's fueled by gasoline, fueled by diesel. The consumer really, at least right now and probably for the near future, the consumer is really going to have a lot of choices in what they want.
No, you're absolutely right. I think we can add to that, to all of those options that you put down on the table, we can add how autonomous the consumers want their cars to be, right? I mean, I'm not a big believer in full autonomy, especially in the cities, in the urban environments, but I definitely feel that we're going to make strides for autonomy in some level, and again, that's going to be another option for consumers. I'm also, looking at some increased interest in the hydrogen fuel cells, not for light duty cars. That's why I made this difference back in the beginning of our conversation, but for, heavy duty trucks and automobiles in general, hydrogen cells are going to be a possibility. So again, to your point on options and on the size of the market and the choices, which is ultimately what we feel is more important for the end consumer, I do agree that this is going to be a very interesting time to be a consumer and to be on the market for a new car, because there are going to be so many different choices, in different price points, different capabilities, different technologies. So I think it's going to be a wild ride for sure.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. Guy, if people want more information about your book, for instance, and where can they find out information about that? Where can they purchase it?
So the best way, I guess, to get more color on the book is head to its webpage. It's presentfuturebook.com. That's presentfuturebook.com, one word. And they can find it pretty much anywhere books are sold. So Amazon would be probably the best place to start. You just write down the name of the book or my name, and you're gonna check it out.
Well, I want to thank you for taking a little time out of your day and joining us in this conversation. It's fascinating, and just the idea that you have a little peek into the future, knowing that what people want, and those in sort of inventors and developers knowing what's going on must keep you smiling all day long, I would think.
It's pretty exciting, John, for sure, and I appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.